An ordinary evening takes a shocking turn when John Cena steps in to do the right thing. What happens next will leave you speechless. Watch until the end to see how one act of courage can change everything. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. What would you do in his place? Share your thoughts in the comments. John Cena stepped out of the McDonald's holding a freshly wrapped burger and a cold soda in his hands. The warm evening breeze felt refreshing after a long day, and he looked forward to enjoying a quiet moment on the bench near the parking lot. As he turned the corner, his eyes caught sight of a young boy sitting on the edge of the sidewalk, his knees drawn to his chest. The boy, no older than 8, wore tattered clothes and had a look of weariness etched onto his small face. His dark eyes glanced up at John briefly before quickly darting back down, as if avoiding attention. John paused, his steps slowing. Something about the boy's defeated posture tugged at his heart. He approached cautiously, not wanting to startle him. "Hey, buddy," John said softly, crouching down to the boy's level. "You hungry?" The boy looked up again, hesitating. His lips parted slightly, but no words came out. John smiled warmly and held out his burger. "Here, take it. You look like you could use it more than me." The boy's eyes widened, and for a moment, he seemed unsure if he should accept. Slowly, he reached out and took the burger, clutching it tightly. "Thank you, sir," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. John's smile grew wider. "No problem. Everyone needs a good burger now and then." Before the boy could take a bite, the roar of engines shattered the calm evening. 8 motorcycles rolled into view, their riders clad in black leather jackets adorned with menacing patches. The bikers laughed loudly, their voices carrying over the rumble of their machines. They parked haphazardly near the McDonald's entrance, dismounted, and turned their attention to John and the boy. "Look who we've got here," one of the bikers shouted, his voice dripping with mockery. He was a large man with a bushy beard and a sneer plastered across his face. "Isn't that John Cena, the big wrestling star?" The others chuckled, joining him as they walked over in a loose formation. John stood up, positioning himself slightly in front of the boy. "Yeah, it's me. Can I help you with something?" The leader, a towering figure with a bald head and a scar running across his cheek, grinned menacingly. "We don't need help, champ. We were just wondering what a big shot like you is doing hanging out with this." He gestured dismissively toward the boy. John's jaw tightened, but he kept his tone calm. "Just sharing some food. No big deal." "Oh, it's a big deal, all right," another biker interjected, his voice thick with derision. "Feeding street rats now, are you? Didn't know charity was part of your show." The boy shrank back, clutching the burger tightly to his chest. John placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "Why don't you leave us alone? We're not bothering anyone." The leader let out a booming laugh. "Leave you alone? Come on, Cena. Show us some of those wrestling moves you're so famous for. Or is all that just for show? Bet you're not so tough without the cameras rolling." The bikers laughed louder, their taunts growing more pointed. "Yeah, Cena. Let's see some of those fancy flips and tricks. Or is it all fake?" John remained silent, refusing to rise to their bait. He glanced at the boy, who was visibly trembling now. Seeing they weren't getting a reaction, the leader shifted his focus to the boy. "Hey, kid, you got manners? You say thank you to your hero here?" Without waiting for a response, he snatched the burger from the boy's hands. "Let's see what you're eating." He inspected it mockingly before tossing it to the ground and stomping on it with exaggerated force. "Oops, looks like your dinner's ruined. Guess you'll have to find scraps somewhere else." Tears welled up in the boy's eyes, but he didn't cry. John stepped forward, his eyes blazing with restrained anger. "Enough," he said, his voice low and firm. "You've made your point. Walk away." The leader smirked, stepping closer until he was nearly chest to chest with John. "And what if we don't? What are you going to do about it, tough guy?" John's fists clenched at his sides. He took a deep breath, his voice steady. "I'm asking you nicely. Don't make me regret it." The bikers exchanged glances, their smirks widening. The leader chuckled, turning back to his crew. "Looks like Cena thinks he can scare us. What do you say, boys? Should we teach him a lesson?" The gang roared in approval, their voices echoing in the quiet night. The leader looked back at John, his grin full of malice. "Let's see what you've really got, champ." John squared his shoulders, positioning himself protectively in front of the boy. "You're about to find out." The air around them grew tense as the bikers began circling John Cena and the boy, their taunts becoming louder and crueler. One of them, a wiry man with a tattoo snaking up his neck, pointed at the boy and sneered, "Look at this little stray. Bet he doesn't even know his daddy. Typical." Another biker, a woman with spiked hair and a cigarette dangling from her lips, added with a laugh, "Probably living off scraps and handouts, just like the rest of them. Isn't that right, kid?" The boy shrank back further, his small hands trembling. John instinctively stepped closer to shield him, his towering frame cutting an imposing figure. "That's enough," he said, his voice steady but firm. "You've had your fun, leave him alone." The leader of the group, the tall, bald man with the scar, smirked and leaned in close to John. "Had our fun? Oh, we're just getting started. What are you going to do about it, hero? Call the cops? Or maybe hit us with one of those fake moves you're so famous for?" The others laughed uproariously, feeding off their leader's energy. One of them mimicked a wrestling move, dramatically throwing himself to the ground and rolling over, clutching his chest as if in pain. "Oh no, Cena, you got me," he mocked, drawing more laughter from the group. John stood his ground, his eyes locked on the leader. "I'm only going to say this once. Walk away now, and this doesn't have to get worse for you." The leader's smirk vanished, replaced by a cold glare. "Worse? You think you're in any position to threaten us? Look around, champ. There's 8 of us and just one of you. You may be big on TV, but here, you're nothing." Another biker stepped forward, pointing at the boy. "And what about him? Think he's worth all this trouble? Just another worthless mouth to feed. Probably gonna grow up to be just like the rest of them." He spat on the ground near the boy's feet, his expression full of disdain. The boy's eyes filled with tears, but he bit his lip to keep from crying. Seeing this, John clenched his fist tightly at his sides. "I said enough," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. The leader raised an eyebrow, his grin returning. "You hear that, boys? Big tough Cena's had enough. Guess we should stop before he calls his mommy." The group burst into laughter again, their mocking tones echoing in the night. Sensing they were pushing him to the edge, the leader took it a step further. He grabbed the boy by the arm and yanked him forward. "Maybe we should teach this little punk some manners. How about it, kid? Want to learn what happens to those who stick their noses where they don't belong?" Before the boy could react, John moved like lightning. He grabbed the leader's wrist, his grip like a vice, and pulled the boy free. "Don't you dare touch him," John said, his voice cold and unwavering. The leader yanked his hand back and stepped closer to John, his face inches away. "Oh, you've done it now, Cena. You want to play hero? Fine. Let's see if you can back it up." He turned to his gang and barked, "Get him." The bikers lunged at John all at once, their shouts filling the air. John moved with precision and power, his years of wrestling experience turning the chaos into a calculated response. The first attacker swung a punch, but John sidestepped it effortlessly and grabbed the man's arm, twisting it behind his back before throwing him to the ground. Another biker charged from the side, but John ducked and delivered a powerful elbow to the ribs, sending him staggering backward. The boy watched in awe and fear as John systematically took down each attacker. A larger biker tried to grab him from behind, but John spun around and landed a perfectly executed body slam, the impact echoing on the pavement. Another came at him with a chain, swinging it wildly, but John caught it mid-air, yanked it free, and used it to disarm the next attacker. The leader hung back, watching as his gang was dismantled one by one. "Come on, you idiots," he shouted. "He's just one guy." Two more bikers rushed John together, but he sidestepped their charge and swept their legs out from under them with a single fluid motion. The crowd that had gathered began cheering, some pulling out their phones to record the fight. "That's it, Cena. Show them what you're made of," someone shouted. The leader's face twisted with anger and humiliation. He stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "All right, Cena, enough games. Let's see how tough you really are." John turned to face him, his expression calm but deadly serious. "You're next," he said simply. The crowd erupted in cheers, the tension building as the leader prepared to make his move. The leader stepped forward, his boots crunching against the pavement as the air between him and John crackled with tension. His scarred face twisted into a sneer as he sized up his opponent. The crowd that had gathered on the sidewalk fell silent, their phones raised to capture what everyone knew would be the climax of the confrontation. The boy, still trembling, clutched the fabric of John's jeans, watching in wide-eyed fear. "You've got guts, Cena," the leader said, rolling his shoulders, "but guts won't save you now. Let's see if you're as tough as you pretend to be." John squared his shoulders, his calm demeanor unwavering. "You don't want to do this. Walk away while you still can." The leader barked a laugh, shaking his head. "Always the hero, huh? Sorry to break it to you, but this isn't the ring. No referees here, no cameras to save your ass when things get rough." He swung first, a wild punch aimed at John's face. John ducked under the blow with a practiced ease, his movements sharp and deliberate. The momentum carried the leader forward, and before he could recover, John delivered a sharp jab to his side, making him stumble. The leader growled in frustration, straightening up and rushing at John again. This time, John caught his arm mid-swing, twisting it behind his back and forcing him to his knees. The crowd gasped, a ripple of excitement running through them. John released him with a shove, stepping back and giving him room to stand. "Still think this is a good idea?" John asked, his tone measured but firm. The leader wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, his eyes blazing with anger. "You're gonna regret that." He charged again, swinging with all his might, but John anticipated the move. He sidestepped and landed a spinning kick to the man's midsection, sending him sprawling onto the pavement. The crowd erupted in cheers as the leader groaned, struggling to get back on his feet. "Stay down," John said, his voice carrying over the noise of the onlookers. "This doesn't have to go any further." But the leader was too consumed by his wounded pride to listen. He scrambled to his feet, reaching for a steel pipe one of his gang members had dropped during the earlier fight. Gripping it tightly, he swung at John with a feral snarl. John stepped back just in time, the pipe slicing through the air inches from his face. The crowd gasped as the leader advanced, swinging the pipe wildly. John remained composed, watching his movements and waiting for the right moment. When the leader swung again, John caught the pipe with both hands, wrenching it from his grasp and tossing it aside. In the same motion, he delivered a powerful knee strike to the leader's stomach, doubling him over. The leader staggered back, clutching his abdomen and gasping for air. John moved in, grabbing him by the collar and lifting him effortlessly off the ground. For a moment, he held him there, their eyes locking. The leader's bravado melted away, replaced by a flicker of fear. "This ends now," John said, his voice cold and final. With a swift motion, he executed his signature move, the attitude adjustment, slamming the leader onto the pavement with controlled force. The impact echoed through the night, drawing gasps and cheers from the crowd. The leader lay sprawled on the ground, groaning in defeat. John straightened up, breathing heavily, but otherwise calm. He turned to the remaining bikers, who had watched the fight in stunned silence. "Take your friend and get out of here," he ordered. "If I see any of you near this kid again, you'll regret it." The bikers hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances before rushing to help their leader to his feet. They muttered curses under their breath as they retreated, dragging their wounded pride along with them. The crowd parted to let them pass, their phones still recording as the bikers mounted their motorcycles and roared off into the night. John turned back to the boy, who looked up at him with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "You okay, kid?" John asked, crouching down to his level. The boy nodded, his voice shaky but determined. "Yeah, thanks to you." John smiled and ruffled the boy's hair. "You're tougher than you think. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The crowd began to disperse, some shouting words of encouragement and admiration as they left. A few approached John, thanking him and shaking his hand. One man held up his phone and said, "This is going viral, Cena. You're a real-life hero." John chuckled softly, waving off the praise. "I'm just doing what anyone would do." As the last of the crowd faded into the night, John walked the boy to a nearby bench and handed him some cash. "Get yourself a meal, okay? And if you ever need help, don't be afraid to ask." The boy nodded, clutching the money tightly. "I won't forget this. Thank you." John watched as the boy disappeared into the safety of the night, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over him. He turned and walked away, the echoes of the crowd's cheers still ringing in his ears. The street was quiet once more, but the adrenaline still coursed through John Cena's veins. He took a deep breath, calming himself as he watched the bikers disappear into the night. The boy had already left with a promise of a warm meal and safety, but the weight of the evening lingered. John turned and began walking back toward his car, his mind replaying the confrontation. Despite the victory, he felt uneasy. He knew men like those bikers rarely let things go. As he reached his car, the unmistakable roar of engines shattered the silence. Turning, he saw the bikers returning, this time with reinforcements. The leader, still limping from their fight, was at the head of the pack, now joined by at least a dozen more riders. Their headlights cast eerie shadows on the walls as they surrounded John, cutting off any chance of escape. Well, look who's still here," the leader sneered, his voice filled with malice. "Thought you could humiliate me and just walk away? Not gonna happen, Cena. Now you're gonna pay." The new arrivals dismounted their bikes, their faces hidden under helmets and bandanas. They carried chains, pipes, and even baseball bats, their intentions clear. The leader stepped forward, gesturing at John with a cocky grin. "You might have handled a few of us, but let's see how you do against all of us." John's expression hardened, his jaw tightening as he assessed the situation. He was outnumbered, but he wasn't about to back down. Slowly, he raised his hands in a defensive stance, his body coiled like a spring. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice low and steady. "This won't end well for you." The leader laughed, the sound cold and cruel. "Oh, I think it will. Boys, let's show him what happens when you mess with the wrong people." They charged at once, a chaotic wave of aggression. John moved like a force of nature, his training and instincts kicking into overdrive. The first biker swung a chain, but John sidestepped, grabbing the chain midair and yanking it free. He used it to sweep the legs out from under another attacker before tossing it aside. A second man came at him with a baseball bat, swinging for his head. John ducked under the blow and landed a powerful uppercut that sent the biker sprawling. Two more came at him from opposite sides, but he grabbed one by the arm and flipped him over his shoulder, using the momentum to send the other stumbling into a wall. The fight was brutal and relentless. John's every move was precise, each punch and kick calculated to neutralize his opponents quickly. Despite the overwhelming odds, he held his ground, refusing to let them gain the upper hand. The crowd of bystanders from earlier had returned, their phones out again as they recorded the escalating spectacle. Shouts of encouragement rang out, spurring John on. One particularly large biker, armed with a crowbar, managed to get close enough to swing. The weapon glanced off John's arm, but he barely flinched. Turning, he grabbed the man by the collar and delivered a devastating knee strike to his stomach, sending him crumpling to the ground. The leader, watching from the sidelines, grew increasingly frustrated. "What the hell are you all doing?" he shouted. "He's just one man. Take him down." His gang hesitated, the fear in their eyes growing as more of them fell to John's relentless counterattacks. Sensing the shift in momentum, John seized the opportunity. He charged at the remaining bikers, his movements a blur of power and precision. Within moments, the street was littered with groaning men, their weapons discarded. Finally, the leader was the only one left standing. His confidence had evaporated, replaced by a mix of anger and fear. He took a step back, raising his hands defensively. "All right, Cena, you've made your point. No need to make this worse." John advanced slowly, his gaze locked on the leader. "Worse? You brought this on yourself. Now it's time to finish it." The leader tried to run, but John was faster. He grabbed him by the back of his jacket and spun him around, lifting him effortlessly into the air. With the crowd cheering wildly, John delivered another signature attitude adjustment, slamming the leader onto the pavement with a resounding thud. The man lay motionless, his bravado completely shattered. John stood over him, breathing heavily but victorious. He turned to the crowd, raising his hand as if to signal the end of the fight. The onlookers erupted in applause, their voices echoing through the night. As the police sirens sounded in the distance, John stepped back, allowing the authorities to handle the aftermath. He gave a brief statement to the officers before returning to his car, his movements calm and composed despite the chaos he had just endured. Driving away, he felt a sense of satisfaction mixed with exhaustion. The fight was over, but the lesson was clear. Strength isn't just about physical power, it's about standing up for what's right, no matter the odds. The echoes of the fight lingered as John Cena drove away from the scene, the distant sound of police sirens fading into the night. He kept his grip firm on the steering wheel, his knuckles white as the adrenaline began to ebb. The boy's face flashed in his mind, those wide, frightened eyes, and he couldn't shake the sense of responsibility that weighed on him. He had done what he could, but the fight had left him with more questions than answers. Was the boy truly safe now? Or would the bikers seek revenge once the heat died down? The city lights blurred past the windows as John replayed the events of the evening, He hadn't set out to be a hero. All he wanted was to do the right thing, to stand up for someone who couldn't stand up for themselves. The memory of the boy clutching that ruined burger, tears streaming down his face, stirred something deep within him. John knew he couldn't let it end there. He pulled into the parking lot of a small diner, needing a moment to think. Inside, the warm glow of fluorescent lights and the hum of quiet chatter provided a stark contrast to the chaos of earlier. John ordered a cup of coffee and sat in a corner booth, his large frame nearly dwarfing the small table. He stared into the dark liquid, his thoughts heavy. A notification buzzed on his phone, snapping him out of his reverie. He picked it up to find dozens of messages and missed calls. Scrolling through, he saw countless links to videos and articles already flooding the internet. The fight had gone viral, with headlines like "John Cena takes down biker gang" and "Real-life hero, WWE star defends innocent boy." Clips of the confrontation were being shared across every platform, and the comments were a mix of awe, gratitude, and disbelief. John sighed, running a hand over his face. He had always been in the public eye, but this was different. This wasn't scripted, choreographed entertainment. This was raw and real. The attention didn't bother him as much as the implications. Would the bikers use this publicity as fuel for retaliation? Would the boy become a target again because of what happened? As he mulled over these thoughts, a soft voice interrupted him. "Excuse me, are you John Cena?" He looked up to see a young woman holding a phone. She looked nervous but excited, her eyes wide with admiration. "I saw the video. That was incredible. You're a real hero." John offered her a small smile. "Just did what anyone else would have done." She shook her head fervently. "No, most people wouldn't have. You stood up for that boy. You gave everyone watching hope that there's still good in the world." She hesitated, then added, "Thank you for that." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He nodded, thanking her before she walked away, leaving him alone with his thoughts once more. The weight of what she said settled in. Maybe this wasn't just about the boy or the bikers. Maybe it was about showing others that it's possible to fight back against injustice, no matter how overwhelming the odds. Determined, John pulled out his phone and called a contact he hadn't spoken to in years. It was someone he knew from his days of charity work, someone who had connections in social services. He explained the situation, describing the boy and what had happened. The person on the other end promised to look into it to ensure the boy received the help and protection he needed. Feeling a sense of relief, John left the diner and drove to a quieter part of the city. He found a park bench and sat under the stars, the night cool and still around him. The fight might have ended, but his role in the boy's life wasn't over. He resolved to follow up, to make sure the boy had a safe place to stay, food to eat, and people who cared about him. The next day, news outlets were still buzzing about the incident. Interviews, commentary, and analysis flooded the airwaves, with experts dissecting every detail. But John avoided it all, focusing instead on the next steps. He visited the boy, who was now staying at a safe house arranged by social services. When the boy saw John, his face lit up with a smile that melted away the weariness of the previous night. "You came back," the boy said, his voice filled with wonder. John crouched down to meet his gaze. "I told you I'd look out for you. You're not alone anymore." The boy hugged him tightly, and for the first time in what felt like years, John felt truly at peace. This wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about doing what was right, about being the kind of person who could make a difference. As he walked away, the weight on his shoulders felt lighter. The road ahead might be uncertain, but John Cena knew one thing for sure. No matter how big the fight, he would always stand up for those who couldn't. Because that's what real strength is all about. And that's how one act of courage can inspire change. What do you think about John Cena's actions? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories. See you in the next one.